Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
And my films deal with what happens when repression and order break down.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast. In this episode, my weird dad will be talking about
David Cronenberg's ultimate experience in inner terror.
Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Heavy Recollections of Horror. This is Mark Begley, your host, and today I am doing an episode called the Cronenberg Clinic because I have been enrolled in something of a Cronenberg Clinic for the last 6 or 7 months, going all the way back to March when I first approached Mike White about doing episodes for the show, and that included early Cronenberg films, and we decided on Shivers for Wake Up Heavy, and then a little ways down the line as we were settling on dates, he brought up the possibility of doing The Brood for the Projection Booth podcast, which I jumped at the chance to do. A lot of research and watching and reading and exploring transpired during this time. I have read a almost 700-page book on The Brood by Stephen Bissett. I read the Shivers monograph by Luke Aspel and interviewed him for the Shivers episode, which you will be hearing sometime in the very near future. I even read High Rise, which is only tangentially and superficially connected to Shivers. I have, of course, watched the movies, Shivers and The Brood, multiple times during this time frame, and I have watched most of, if not all of, David Cronenberg's 70s and 80s output. And while I was rewatching Scanners a week or so ago, little connections kept occurring in my head. That's what sort of inspired this little primer episode to introduce the Shivers and Brood episodes that will be coming out in October. I even went as far as ordering the latest Blu-ray release of Shivers from Vestron Video Classics Collection, I think is the name of this series. Listened to the commentary while I watched the movie, which is not something I normally do, which I've probably said. I listened to the commentary for The Brood from the Criterion Collection disc of that, watched tons of videos of David Cronenberg, read all that stuff, read some articles, watched some connected movies, and those will come up in this episode. So this is all kind of just about those connections, and I think connections are sort of a big thing with Cronenberg movies in general. It's that idea of intersections, and this is sort of a Ballardian and Burroughsian, so J.G. Ballard and William S. Burroughs, who Cronenberg is connected with. You know, these ideas pop up and permeate society, gestalt or zeitgeist, all these fun words that pop up. And so, like I said, when I was watching Scanners, little scenes reminded me of earlier Cronenberg movie scenes. There's a lot of shared actors in his movies. A lot of them are just bit roles, but you see these faces pop up. It all came together in that viewing of Scanners. And Scanners is a movie, I don't know if I've mentioned or not. I waver back and forth. Every time I watch it, I have a different reaction, which I guess is a good thing to say about a movie. Sometimes I find it extremely boring. Other times I find it totally fascinating. This time when I watched it, I appreciated it a lot more for all those connections. It's kind of a mess of a movie, as are a couple of his other films, and there's a reason for that, and I will probably get into that at some point on this. Yeah, that is one of the earliest Cronenbergs for me, and I know that comes up in either the Shivers or the Brood episode. And I remember liking it when I was younger because of the special effects, because of the strangeness of it. Although it is one of the least strange of those early films when you compare it to the stuff that's going on in Shivers and Rabid and definitely Videodrome.
Let's open those neural floodgates.
So without further ado, let's get into what those connections are and the major themes and motifs of Cronenberg films. What we call Cronenbergian are the idea of the manipulation and or mutation of body and or mind. And this happens in Shivers, this happens in Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, The Fly, Dead Ringers, and Naked Lunch. Even an outlier film like The Dead Zone has that mind-body connection, and I don't get too heavy into the adaptations on this, but there is definitely a connection between the physical ailments of Johnny in that and his abilities. Just look what happens to his hair when he comes out of that coma.
The ice is gonna break!
And I would go so far as to include Crash in that, which I watched for the first time in decades, because I knew at that point I would be doing this episode. There is definite body manipulation in that film, and you could even say it extends to the mind. How these characters' idea of sexual gratification is wrapped up and enveloped in car crashes and the disfigurement, I almost said dismemberment, although that could be appropriate as well, that happens because of car crashes. And most of the time, these mutations or manipulations are brought about by a quote-unquote mad scientist. And I may stretch that term a bit here, but we have that in Shivers with Dr. Emil Hobbs. We have it in Rabid with the experiments, the grafting experiments that happen at the Keloid Institute for Reconstructive Surgery. I know that's not the name of the place, but I'm struggling for terms here. We have it in The Brood with the Dr. Hal Raglan character, who is a psychologist and or psychiatrist, not a medical doctor, but same idea. Got some funky stuff going on there. And even in Dead Ringers with the Mantle twins and their very interesting gynecological tools that they create. Many of Cronenberg's films share this commingling of sex and disease, including Shivers, Rabid, The Brood, The Fly, Dead Ringers. I might even toss Naked Lunch into that whole mix. And those manipulations and or mutations generally create some kind of monster or creature, which we see in Shivers, Rabid, The Fly, and I'll stretch it even for Videodrome and Dead Ringers, and also for Naked Lunch. There are numerous creatures in that, although those are more, I wouldn't say that they were mutations or manipulations, but have you seen a mugwump?
Mugwumps, high jumps, low slumps, big bumps, don't you work as hard as you play.
And the idea of the mad scientist or doctor brings up, these guys have to have a place to operate. And one thing I absolutely love about Cronenberg films are the names that he comes up with for the clinics or the institutions that these people work for or work in. So let's get into some of those wonderful names. And these go back to the early experimental films that Cronenberg did that I think get brought up maybe a little bit in Shivers in the Brood episodes, but he did a couple of 35mm experimental films that were shot without sync sound, and stereo, the first one, has virtually no sound except for some voiceover narration. Crimes of the Future has some music and other things in it, but so starting all the way back there, because they do connect with his, especially with his 70s films. In stereo, we get the Canadian Academy for Erotic Inquiry. In Crimes of the Future, we have a couple of different clinics and institutions, including the House of Skin, the Metaphysical Import-Export Company, and the Oceanic Podiatry Group. In Shivers, we have the Starliner, the hotel itself, maybe not as evocative a name, but it gives you the idea of either a cruise ship or a spaceship, and the towers themselves are brought to us by General Structures Incorporated, which is just about the most generic name, but I love it. In Rabid, we have the Keloid Clinic for Plastic Surgery. That's the name I was struggling with earlier. And in The Brood, we have Soma Free, the Soma Free Institute, which is Dr. Raglan's questionable psychiatric institute that practices psychoplasmics. In Scanners, we have CONSEC, and what CONSEC stands for, I have no idea, but they manufacture the drug ephemeral, which is what gives the scanners their abilities, and ephemeral is such a perfect name, it sounds like an actual drug. In Videodrome, we have Civic TV, we have the Spectacular Optical Corporation, and the Cathode Ray Mission.
Death to Videodrome. Long live the new flesh.
There really isn't one for The Fly, but I like to assume that Brundle's loft is called the Brundle Lab, so... And we'll get into character names in a little bit here because they're amazing as well. And then in Dead Ringers, again another stretch, but the Mantle Clinic, which is the twins' last name. So speaking of names, this is another thing that I love from Cronenberg. He comes up with these hard-edged, rough and strange names for a lot of his characters. Starting again with Shivers, we have Nick and Janine Tudor, the Svebens, who are the couple that first show up to look at an apartment there. Betts, which I am assuming is short for Elizabeth. Emil Hobbs, and the greatest name in maybe any of Cronenberg's movies, Rollo Linsky.
Hey, how about the pickle?
In Rabid, we have Dr. Keloid, Hart Reed, Murray Cypher, who is again played by Joe Silver, and we'll get into actors in a little bit here. And although this isn't hard-edged, I find it very amusing, the Trucker Smooth Eddie.
You want a bite? Steak on a bun. It's real good.
In The Brood, we have Hal Raglan, that is the Oliver Reed character, Frank and Nola Carveth, Dr. Birkin, and Jan Hartog, who is played by another Cronenberg regular who I absolutely love. And we've got a plethora of names in Scanners. Cameron Vale, Kim Obrist, Daryl Revick, Braden Keller, Arno Krostik, and Dieter Touts. In Videodrome, we don't have as many, but we have Max Wren, Nikki Brand, Bianca and Brian Oblivion, and Barry Convex. The interesting thing about The Fly is that there was an existing script for this before Cronenberg came on and redid the script. And he changed all of the names. So this kind of goes to just his method and his desire to have these very strange names in his films. So we have Seth Brundle, Veronica and or Ronnie Quaife. And that last name just brings up all kinds of things in my head. Or one thing in particular, I should say. Stathis Borens, Dr. Cheevers, and Markey, which I just threw in there because that's what a lot of people call me. In Dead Ringers, we have Beverly and Elliot Mantle, Danuta, Birchall, and Anders Wolek. And Anders Wallach is actually played by Stephen Lack, who is the lead in Scanners. And if you want to check out the names for his characters in Existenz, I suggest looking at the IMDb page for that because they are wacky. And that is still one of the Cronenbergs that I have yet to see, so I didn't want to run through that entire list. But have a look. They are fun.
He tells me that even old flesh is erotic flesh.
And of course, all of these wonderful characters with fascinating names are played by actors, and many of the actors in one film appear in another Cronenberg film. So I kind of want to run through, and this may not be an exhaustive list and not include stuff past Naked Lunch. So you may see or know of other Cronenberg character-actor connections. And if you do, great. Send me a couple. I am just now trying to rectify my later Cronenberg watch history. I've seen History of Violence and parts of Eastern Promises, but most of his later films I have passed on. And a lot of that has to do mainly with the cast. But I did watch Maps to the Stars, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, and there are connections to other Cronenberg films, particularly The Brood in that. Give it a watch. It's on Netflix right now. Starting with those experimental films I mentioned earlier, we have Ronald Mlodzik, who was in both Stereo and Crimes of the Future, and is in Shivers in a minor role, and in Rabid, I think, as kind of a glorified extra in the Keloid Clinic early on in the film. We have possibly one of my favorite reappearing actors, Joe Silver, who is in Shivers and Rabid. Sonny Forbes, who plays the unfortunate maintenance man in Shivers, is also in Rabid and in Scanners. In one, he's a cop, and in the other, he's an assassin. We have Fred Daterline, who is Emil Hobbs in Shivers, and Dieter Tautz in Scanners. And then one more actor that I found from Shivers and another Cronenberg film is Vlasta Vrana. He is in both Shivers and Rabid. And a lot of times, the second appearance of these guys is really just as kind of glorified extras. Moving on to Rabid, we get our introduction to probably my favorite repeating actor in the Cronenberg umbrella, Robert Silverman. He has a bit part in Rabid. He has a bigger part in The Brood, and probably my favorite role of his.
It's called lymphosarcoma, and it's spreading.
And he appears in Scanners.
And I think you're in big trouble, chum.
Which is maybe my second favorite, and then all the way down in Naked Lunch. And I think I remember when I saw Naked Lunch going, I know this guy's face. And that was pretty far removed from the last time I had seen Scanners. And, anecdotally, he appears in Jason X, which also stars David Cronenberg. And that is one of the Friday the 13th films that I have yet to see. Now, some of these names I may mispronounce because they are French-Canadian names. We have a repeat appearance from Victor Desi in Rabid. He plays, I believe, a doctor in both of these, in Rabid and in Scanners. And then Gary McKeon is the guy that plays Smooth Eddie in Rabid, and he is Mike in The Brood. He's got a much bigger role in The Brood. Kind of a key role, actually. And then we have Denis Lacroix, who is in Rabid and Scanners. Nicholas Campbell. This is a familiar face to me because I watched The Dead Zone so many times growing up. He made his first appearance in Fast Company, which is a movie I am completely ignoring because it has nothing to do with the rest of David Cronenberg's filmography. I'm sure it's brought up in the Shivers episode, possibly in the Brood episode. I watched it out of curiosity, and it's a race car movie. It's not badly made, but it's just not all that interesting to me. It does have John Saxon in it, though, so that's always a plus. So Nicholas Campbell first appeared in Fast Company, and he is also in The Brood and The Dead Zone and Naked Lunch, which I almost forgot about. He plays the Ersatz Jack Kerouac character in that. Also from The Brood, we have little Cindy Hines, who has a small role in The Dead Zone as one of Johnny Smith's, not students, but one of the kids he tutors. I'll bring her up again when we talk about these people in other Canucksploitation films. Rainer Schwartz was in The Brood and Videodrome. Stephen Lack, who I mentioned, the wooden lead in Scanners. This is one of the things that bothers me when I watch it these days. His performance is so stiff and wooden, and that's something that I just wouldn't really have recognized as a kid. But he has a small role in Dead Ringers. Also from Scanners is Giza Kovacs. He always looks familiar to me, again, because of the Dead Zone connection. He is Sonny in that. Martin Sheen's henchman, basically. For some reason, think that he's in other Cronenberg, and maybe he's in a later one, but as far as I could find, he's just in Scanners as well, as in a very small role as an assassin. And then a couple of these are kind of back-to-back. Since Videodrome and The Dead Zone were filmed the same year, a number of actors got used in both, and Peter Dvorsky is one of those. He is in Videodrome and The Dead Zone. And our man, Leslie Carlson, is in Videodrome as Barry Convex, and he is the reporter who gets blackmailed in The Dead Zone by Martin Sheen and Giza Kovacs. And he's also in The Fly. Let's not forget that. He plays a doctor in The Fly. Speaking of playing doctors, David Cronenberg has cameos in a couple of his films as doctors. He is particularly a gynecologist in The Fly and in Dead Ringers. And he plays doctors in a number of other films. I think I counted maybe 5 or 6 films like Nightbreed and others where he plays a doctor, and that goes back to his early studies. That's what he studied, was biology, I think, believe, in school.
We're going to do it the scan way. I'm going to suck your brain dry.
And as I've touched on, a lot of these actors end up in other Canucksploitation films, and this is to be expected, really, because they were trying to energize this industry in Canada during the 70s and the whole tax shelter deal and all that. And this will come up again when I talk about, or maybe I'll just mention it now. This is sort of why Scanners and Videodrome started shooting without scripts and are sort of messy and can get a little convoluted because of this tax shelter money, which would usually come in towards the end of the year because rich people were like, I need to have a big tax write-off. Who's making a movie? Here's money. And they had to be done by December 25th. That was the cutoff. This actually comes up a little bit in the Full Circle episodes with Simon Fitzjohn. He mentions this. This is what happened with Full Circle as well. It was a Canadian-British production. And a lot of times they wouldn't start until October or November of that year, or even December, and have a very short time to get everything done. And so Scanners and Videodrome, I believe, both started shooting without finished scripts. Those are sort of his messiest films as far as plot goes. But these actors pop up in a lot, and I was kind of surprised when I was looking through it at how many of these films I have actually already talked about on the show. So we'll see some familiar titles and names. And 3 actors from Shivers, Sonny Forbes, Dorothy Davis, and the old man, Roy Witham, are all in Kathy's Curse. And if you haven't seen Kathy's Curse, if you really want to get a taste of Canucksploitation, you need to see Kathy's Curse.
Your mother's a bitch.
And then a number of those actors from Kathy's Curse, as well as their connection with Shivers, are in The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which I have talked about on the show. Dorothy Davis is in that, as is Martin Sheen, of course, from The Dead Zone, and a handful of other characters crossover between Kathy's Curse and The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, which is, yes, a Canucksploitation film. Oh, and I almost forgot, one more connection to Kathy's Curse and Cronenberg films is Peter MacNeil, who is in Rabid, Crash, and A History of Violence, as well as Kathy's Curse. I mentioned Cindy Hines being in another film, and I talked about this on, I believe, one of the Notes from Home episodes, because I watched it due to my research on The Brood. The film Deadline, she was in very shortly after filming The Brood. And Art Hindle, who is the lead in The Brood, is in the Conexploitation classic Black Christmas, as is Leslie Carlson, who is also in Deranged, which Bob Clark is associated with, I believe, as producer. From Scanners, Lawrence Dane is in Rituals, which I know I've talked about on the show, and you should definitely check out. He is in Happy Birthday to Me, which is one of my Why Do I Hate Slasher episodes, as well as Of Unknown Origin, the killer rat movie with Peter Weller, who, of course, as we all know, and I keep saying of course, sorry, is in Naked Lunch, and does a wonderful William S. Burroughs / William Lee in that. I have a funny story about Naked Lunch the first time I saw it.
It's time for another tangent.
We had taken a trip to San Ramon, where my aunt was living at the time. My aunt and my cousin, I believe, and my niece. I think it was around the holidays of 1991. I knew this was probably my only chance to see Naked Lunch, since in Fresno we weren't really doing the art films just yet. On a trip to San Francisco, because San Ramon is close, I made my sister and brother-in-law go see Naked Lunch with me at this little rinky-dink art house cinema there, and I don't think they've forgiven me since then. And when we got back to my aunt's, apparently there had been a review of it in the paper, and they knew that we were going to see it, and were like, "What did you guys go see today?" And I was like, "Don't ask."
Say, Bill, do you think you could rub some of this powder on my lips?
But, of course, from Scanners, we have Michael Ironside, who is in Visiting Hours, which was a Why Didn't I Rent This episode. Neil Affleck, one of the leads from My Bloody Valentine, again, I've done an episode on that, is in very briefly in Scanners at the beginning, and has, I think, an even smaller role in Visiting Hours. And there's a lot of crossover between those two films, Happy Birthday to Me and Visiting Hours. And a lot of times they have the same producers, which, again, are the people that brought many of Cronenberg's films to the screen. And then Louis Delgrand, the dude what gets his head blowed up in Scanners, is in Happy Birthday to Me. And this has nothing to do with anything, but he's also in Atlantic City, which I watched recently. And I may have mentioned that on an episode of Notes from Home, but that is actually a Conexploitation film as well. It's just not a horror film. Also has Angus McInnes in it. From Videodrome, we get Sonia Smits.
Death to Videodrome. Long live the new flesh.
Who is in The Pit. And like Kathy's Curse, if you haven't seen The Pit, you absolutely need to. It is 100% bonkers. Conexploitation, even though it was filmed in Michigan, I believe.
I was just watching you sleep.
Jack Creeley, who plays Brian Oblivion in Videodrome, is in Rituals, and I don't recall him in that. I've watched it fairly recently. I'm not sure what he plays. He is also in Dr. Strangelove, and I thought about it for a second as I was watching the movie, and I thought, oh yeah, I totally recognize him from The War Room.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the War Room.
So, not an exploitation film, but still a weird connection to filmdom in general. And Julie Connor from Videodrome is in Spasms, which is a film that is on my watch list to get to this week, actually, and Oliver Reed is also in that, and I believe it was shot shortly after The Brood. And this comes up on the Shivers episode. Mike and I discuss that wonderful VHS cover from Spasms that intrigued me so much. Hey, maybe that'll turn into a Why Didn't I Rent This episode, because I saw that every time I went to the video store at multiple video stores and never rented it for some reason. And I'm going to watch it this week. And finally, the biggest connection between many of these, not only Cronenberg character actors, but Conexploitation actors, is a Canadian show I believe I mentioned on the My Bloody Valentine episode, The Littlest Hobo. Maybe tomorrow. And I know nothing about the show other than it seems like most Canadian actors appeared on it. It is akin to our very own, very dear Murder, She Wrote.
And it's spreading.
Okay, that wraps up this Cronenberg Clinic primer episode. The Shivers and Brood episodes will be out shortly. The Brood will be on the Projection Booth podcast on October 31st, right before Halloween.
What Mark meant to say was October 30th.
Perfect timing. I'm really happy with that. I think people will enjoy it. The Shivers episode will be out sometime before then. And I haven't decided yet when to release it. I want to get the maximum audience as possible for that from Mike's fans and from my own listeners. So sometime within the week prior to the 30th, I have been toying with the idea of throwing it up on my practically defunct Patreon page early for anybody who's interested in throwing me $1 to listen to it. This may not pan out, but it may be up by the time this episode is released, and I should probably have a definitive answer for that for this episode, so you'll actually go there, but I haven't made up my mind yet as I'm recording this, so it'll either be there or it won't, and I will announce it on all my social media and on my website if I do decide to do that. And it's pay for what you want. This is not a subscription plan. I put stuff up for $1. If you want to listen to it a couple weeks early, it might possibly be there. Or I may just wait it out and release it a week before the Brood episode. I don't know. I don't know yet.
What are you even talking about?
That's how I operate. You guys should know that by now. It's been over 2 years since I started Wake Up Heavy. That's how my brain works.
That's weird.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform.
Remember, rate and review the podcast. It helps our rankings.
And look out for those Cronenberg episodes soon. Have a wonderful October. Watch lots of spooky movies and watch lots of Cronenberg movies. Go through them all. Thanks so much for listening, and don't forget,
anything can happen when you wake up heavy.
John and Mitchie were getting kind of itchy just to leave the folk music behind. Saul and Denny working for a penny, trying to get a fish on the line. In a coffee house, Sebastian sat, and after every number they passed the hat. McQueen and McGuire's just a getting higher in L.A., you know where that's at. And no one's getting fat except Mama Cass. Solly said, Danny, you know there aren't many who can sing a song the way that you do. Let's go south. Danny says, Ollie, golly, don't you think that I wish I could play guitar like you? So Danny and Sebastian sat the night out, and after every number they passed the hat. McQueen and McGuire still are getting higher in L.A., you know where that's at. And no one's getting fat except Mama Cass. When Cass was a sophomore, planned to go to Swarthmore, but she changed her mind one day. Standing on the turnpike, thumb out the hitchhike, take her to New York right away. When Jenny met Cass, he gave a love bomb. Called John and Saul, and that was the month from McQueen and McGuire couldn't get no higher, but that's what they were aiming at. And no one's getting fat except Mama Cass. Mugwumps, high jumps, low slumps, big bumps, don't you work as hard as you play. Make up, break up, everything is shake up, yes, it had to be that way. Sebastian and Saul form a spoonful. Shelton and getting very tuneful. McQueen and McGuire just a catching fire in L.A., you know where that's at. Everybody's getting Mama Cass. Disgusted, agents can't be trusted, and then she wants to go to the sea. Cass can't make it, she says we'll have to fake it. We knew she'd come eventually. Greasing on American Express cars. No rent, but keeping out the heat's hard. Love these good vibrations and our imaginations can't go on indefinitely. And California dreaming is becoming a reality.
Then I think you're in big trouble, chum.